game that was a little bit more exciting offensively, the game before this one down in Auburn, number 7 Houston, they go into Allen Fieldhouse and they take out the 12th ranked Jayhawks. I mean, Blake, this game, Flory Badunga, your man, he was a star for Kansas, but it just wasn't enough. He really looked good there in the 4 spot, kind of next to Hunter Dickinson, and Zeke Mayo was having a good night, but this was just the night of Jawan Roberts. He could not be stopped. He was a force in the paint. He was working Hunter Dickinson in moments, and also Malik Wilson. He had big time shots. Got the game into double overtime. Excuse me, this is a double overtime affair, and this was just a great college basketball game all around. And I really loved what I saw out of Houston here because I picked Kansas, and hand up on that one, I was wrong. I thought that the home court would push Kansas over the top, but obviously Houston proved that they're not just a defensive unit and that they've got some big time shot makers too.
Yeah, this is a huge win for a Houston team who people were thinking didn't have a lot of like resume wins, and like since like I think it was November, October, like early season wins from the Players Era tournament. So to go into the Fog and win in a double overtime drama fashion is surreal, honestly, especially with them putting up 92 points for being known as a defensive team. That's like unheard of, really, for that program. Jawan Roberts looked unstoppable in the paint, just using soft touch around the rim. Uh, Milos Uzan, I think I'm saying that right. I hope I am. He put on a show tonight. 17 points, 9 boards, 9 assists. Looked a little bit like Cade Cunningham out there. Was doing everything really for that team. And then you got guys like Arsenault. I mean, he played really good defense off the bench. Malik Wilson coming off the bench, 18 points, had the three to send it to, I think it was double overtime, or it might have been overtime, the first overtime. I forget. I'm half asleep right now trying to wing this, but yeah, he had a really good performance. And then on the Kansas side, I mean, that Flory and Dickinson lineup is working really, really well right now. Flory Badunga in the pick and roll, it's practically impossible to stop when you got a 5-man like Dickinson as well. So, I mean, if they keep that bread and butter working through the season, I think they'll be perfectly fine. They just need Zeke Mayo not to shoot 6 of 17 every game. And they really need AJ Store to, like, step it up because he's really been a no-show for, like, 95% of the season. I mean, preseason, I think I said something about him having shades of Anthony Edwards. Don't know why I ever said that, but I mean, he's got the same body type, can play fairly well. He just hasn't shown any potential really this season, besides like a game or two. He just doesn't seem comfortable at all. So they really need those guys to step up. Ryland Griffin today, unbelievable, coming off the bench, 5 threes. I think it was like a 97% true shooting percentage for him. Like that's just unheard of, really. So I mean, it's nothing really to hang your head about, Jayhawks fans. Just got to step up your defense in crunch time, and you need your key guys to really step up play there.
Yeah, obviously there's no shame in taking a loss here because, I mean, Kelvin Sampson, that Houston program, they've been a force for years now. That's a quality program all across the board. And but I do think that Jayhawks fans are going to be kicking themselves a little bit because I believe they had about a 6 point lead heading into the end of regulation, and they just kind of let go of the rope there. And Brandy, I think that Bill Self might be kicking himself over this one for a little bit because this really could have kind of reasserted them into the top of that Big 12 race. And I mean, they're not out of it by any means right now, but this definitely would have helped them a lot.
Right. And really, this game should have never even gone into overtime towards the end of the game. Like, this was just kind of a complete meltdown by Kansas there at the end. But the good news is this really was a Flory Badunga coming out party. Even though he fouled out, he did have an insanely impressive game, and he fits really well on the floor with Hunter Dickinson. And this really was the first game it seemed like that Rylan was kind of back to shooting how he was shooting when he was at Alabama last year, which we hadn't really seen that from him because of lineups and whatever else has been going on with him. So I think that's something to build on. Both Flory and Ryland performing amazing. They just so happen to run into a Houston team that has finally figured out that they can go to somebody else besides LJ Cryer on offense. So the last couple of weeks now, Juwan Roberts has really stepped up on offense for Houston, and that's been huge in getting these kind of wins for them. And also helps that they have the best defensive player in the country, in my opinion, on their team, and Tugler. 5 blocks on the road to me is crazy. And I think he just puts them in a position to win games like this.
Yeah, 100%. And I also want to give some flowers to Emmanuel Sharp because at one point in this game, he went out for a little bit. He got kind of knocked up there. And then flash forward to the end of the first overtime. He contributes there. He gets the first three that set up Malik Wilson to get it sent into double overtime. So big time shots there. And obviously for Kansas, Flory Badunga, the coming out party for him. KJ Adams obviously wasn't a part of this game, but Blake, I mean, you're the biggest Flory advocate out there. Do we think that it's time Bill Self just rolls him out there full time in the starting 5 and let KJ kind of take the back seat, or what do we think about that?
I think we need to build the Flory statue outside of Allen Fieldhouse right now. Get it in the works. Yeah, he needs to be in the starting lineup. The past 2-3 games, he's been in the starting lineup. He's put up some really, really good numbers on the offensive glass, on the defensive glass, and just pick and roll maestro, really. You can't really stop him when he's going off a pick and roll. He's super explosive around the rim, moves well for a guy his size. And the crazy part of it all is, like, he hasn't been playing basketball for more than, like, 4 years. Like, he came over from, I forget where it was, overseas, and it was his, like, I think sophomore year was his first year playing high school basketball, or just basketball in general. So, I mean, what this guy's doing now is kind of crazy to think.
Yeah, they were showing some of his highlights on the broadcast, not his basketball highlights, though, some soccer highlights from a
Soccer,
couple
yeah,
years
that's what he
back.
grew up playing.
Yeah, that was kind of his bread and butter growing up, from what I gathered. Another piece of the Kansas side of things here, I do have to give some credit to a guy that's kind of taken some heat on here before, DeJuan Harris. He had 12 assists on the night. He was dishing the ball and distributing fairly well, but obviously, Kansas fell ultimately in this one. And what do we think before we head off of this subject? Does this change anything we think about Kansas long term? Brandy, I'll let you start, but I'm not super fazed by this in terms of what they can be, but I do think that in terms of just what they want to accomplish in the Big 12, if they wanted to assert themselves in the conference title race and try and place themselves within more of a striking distance of the teams at the top there, the Houston, obviously, who's still perfect, and then Iowa State that's at 7-1 right behind them. I think that hurts them in that regard, but I don't know. I still think that I like what this team could possibly do if they piece some things together. There's a lot of work to do, though.
Yeah, I think this game told us more about Houston really than it did Kansas for long term, especially when it comes to the conference title race. For Kansas though, like, there was a lot to build off and a lot of really positive things, but there were still some late game decisions and some moments that made me question, what's going on with this team and maybe this staff a little bit. Um, but I still really like Zeke Mayo. I like Hunter Dickinson on the defensive side of the ball. And I like Rylan Griffin. And I think it could end up being a blessing in disguise that KJ Adams didn't play tonight. And they kind of can see how this team has looked on offense without him tonight. And I think it's a better team without him out there on the floor on the offensive side of the ball. So I think that's something to build off of. What decisions go into, how their lineups look once he comes back. But I don't know if it's anything to be worried about for Kansas. I just think that their preseason expectations compared to their actual performance is a lot different, but we kind of already knew that at this point in the season anyways.
Yeah, for sure. Blake, how about you? What are we thinking about Kansas moving forward? I mean, you obviously said that you wouldn't be too upset if you're a Jayhawk fan, but going strictly in the long term, like Big 12, rest of Big 12 play and beyond, what do we think?
Uh, yeah, I still hold that belief. I don't really think there's anything to drop their head about. I feel like that game at home against Iowa State on the 3rd of February will be really telling of like where they stand in the Big 12. If they can pull that one off, I mean, maybe that could boost them to second in the conference, top three, something like that. But the next couple games should be rather easy. UCF and then at Baylor. Baylor's really struggled this year. VJ Edgecombe is starting to heat up though, so I mean, I guess we'll have to see how that one turns out, but they should be comfortable until that Iowa State game.
Yeah, I definitely think we learned a lot more about Houston because this was a team heading out of non-conference play. They went through that rough stretch we've mentioned before where they lost to Bama, San Diego State, and they just seemed like they were kind of lacking some quality wins there for a little bit and didn't really look like they had it all figured out yet. But they've emerged completely from where they were sitting there unscathed in the Big 12 so far. And I mean, talk about making a statement going into Allen Fieldhouse. Not many teams come out of there with a victory, and to do it in double overtime fashion in spots where you were down and out, it looked like. I mean, fought back from down six to even get it into double overtime and find a way to win that game. That's a hell of a result there for Cougars fans, and you got to be excited. And something I'm excited about too with Houston. February 22nd, when they play Iowa State, I'm going to be seated for that one because that's going to be the best of the best in the Big 12. I'm really excited to see what happens there. And obviously, Iowa State, they survived that scare today, too, and ended up winning by double digits. So they've been looking very, very good as well. Big 12 basketball, it's looking pretty solid. But